Police officers of Reddit, what was your they could have gotten away with it if they had kept their mouth shut moment? I had a car pass me once. Passenger hangs the upper half of his body out of the passenger side window with his middle finger in the air while screaming, "Frick the police." He had my attention for the seatbelt violation. I got behind the car and ran the registration. Registration is suspended. Registered owner's driver's license is attached to the registration and his license is suspended. Registered owner also has 2 warrants for retail theft. I stop the car, and they both started with the free speech thing and how I can't stop them for giving me the finger or swearing, which is 100% correct, when I pointed out that I can, however, stop them for the passenger not wearing a seatbelt and for the registration violation. Suddenly they got quiet. Driver got arrested for suspended license and his warrants and the passenger got himself a citation. The driver's vehicle got impounded. Moral of the story? Tell your passengers to shut their mouths. Had that guy not been a moron, his buddy would have been homeward bound. Lol. Like the Chris Rock video, how to not get your ass kicked by the police. I was asked to help keep peace while 2 probation officers searched a guy's house. Before everyone gets upset, in most jurisdictions, you have to submit to a search of your person and your home if you're on probation. During the search, a PO lifted the probationer's mattress and said monotonously, "Wow." The probationer got upset and said, "Yeah, it's freaking meth and a gun. Arrest me. I don't give a frick." Turns out the PO found a huge dildo, but after the guy opened his mouth, the PO lifted the mattress more and found a bunch of individually wrapped grams of meth and a Glock 17. The PO said that seeing the dildo was enough for him to ignore the mattress, but because the guy said something, he kept looking. That's guy's attitude and his need to open his mouth got him 10 years in prison. LPT how to hide your stuff. Okay, so we had a DUI accident where a guy kept driving straight into the woods into a tree because his GPS was predicting a future street. He walked back to his hotel room and left his check-in papers in the car. So we go to the hotel and go to his room and knock on the door. He did not have to answer, but he did. He was pretty clearly drunk. I asked him if he had anything to drink since the accident. He did not have to answer, or he could have told us that he drank after the accident. He said, "No, I haven't had anything to drink since the accident. And where I'm from you have 24 hours to report a property damage only accident. So it wasn't even a hit and run." So as I'm locking the guy up, he tells me he's a lawyer. I told him I hope you're not a defense attorney, but in his defense, he was drunk. Michael, there's no road here. Currently watching Live PD, and the guy told the officer I have caffeine pills in my back pocket, gets them out, puts them on the hood. Everyone's chill. Dude then comes clean and says it's Molly, and the officers look at each other and go, "Do we even have a test kit for that?" Other officer says no. Dude's face just shows he should have kept his mouth shut. No, a police officer, but I do know of this house in my local village that was a notorious drug den. The police came to search the place but couldn't find anything. As they were leaving, the lovely owner yelled at them that they should have brought the drug dogs. So yeah, they came back a few days later with the drug sniffing dogs and found huge amounts of drugs hidden away. Absolute morons. This one made me laugh. Not a cop but pretty applicable to the thread. When I was in high school, I liked to park in parking spots that cars had parked poorly next to just as a frick you. One time I was at a high school football game and a Jeep had parked like crap. He was nearly halfway into the spot next to him and parked at an angle. I was driving a 98 Fit Chevy Silverado, big old pickup truck, at the time, and I had my brother help guide me into the spot, so I was perfectly in the lines. That made it so the driver door was completely impossible to get in. I took a picture for the novelty of it and went on my way. When I got back to my car, the Jeep was gone and every panel on the passenger side of my car was keyed. There was an officer nearby, so I told him about it and showed him the picture. He told me there's not a lot they could do because there were no witnesses, but he'd give it a shot. He looked up their license plate, called them and asked them if they had done it. They confessed and ended up having to pay $1,600 in restitution along with getting a felony. Soul bro yo. Used to drive an old ass Scottsdale Custom Deluxe and loved messing with crappy parking people. A cousin of a friend of mine travels around the state to take in deadbeat dads. Gets to one place, a 4-year-old kid is home, dad isn't. So the cop starts talking to the kid, making sure he is okay and such. After a bit of this, kid says to cop, "Want to see my dad's secret garden?" Takes him to a closet with a false back, opens it up to see a small pot farm. Guy gets home to a few cop cars and a few chargers. Good reason to not leave a 4-year-old home alone, I guess. Pull over this guy for expired tabs. Ask for his ID and he's feeling around for his wallet. Can't find it. He says, "Ah man, I'm one of you. It's cool." "Oh, what department?" "Oh, actually I'm a security guard, but same thing. I'm polite. So where's your ID?" "Oh, it's in the," and he motions to the trunk. "It's in the trunk actually." "No, my BS radar is going off." "Okay, want to get you it out of the trunk?" "Nah, I don't have it." He starts looking around for another story to use, but now I know I'm supposed to stay out of the trunk. He's also not giving me any more information. "No ID. Then I have to take you in and get you fingerprinted. I'm going to get into that trunk one way or another." He's looking like he's lost. I ask him what's in the trunk, but he's not talking anymore. We pull him out and get him in cuffs. Another officer takes him to get it through fingerprints. Since his car is expired past 6 months California, we tow the car. In the process of getting ready to tow the car, we need to take a quick inventory. In the trunk was a police uniform with fake patches and a metal badge. No gun, but a duty belt. He also has stacks of child pee. This is a guy who a neighboring city had been looking for months. His MO was to dress as a police officer, talk to kids, and you can figure out the rest. If he just gave me his name, I could have looked up his ID and verified he had one. I'd probably have let him go. But honestly, I'm really happy about this one. Good on you, man. My mom once managed to talk her way into a lesser fine for a traffic offense, but wasn't satisfied with that, so managed to sass her way right back into the full fine. Sigh. Done that. Got to know when to hold and fold, and sometimes you learn that lesson the hard way. I've had countless times where dudes give consent to search them or the vehicle and they end up having drugs. It baffles me why you would let me search if you don't have to, knowing there's some dang heroin in your Mayo. I'm a nice guy, and I enjoy a chat. You'd be surprised how much this lowers someone's guard. Stood in full uniform, people will just start telling you things that could get them in trouble. Multiple times I had to tell people to shut up. It was usually petty things like where they hid their weed stash, that they'd got a bifter in their pocket for later. Not really worth the time and effort to deal with how skeezy we were. One time a guy really got himself in trouble by effectively telling me he had stolen property on him. I had to act on that one. He wouldn't have gotten away with it, but a patron of the bar that my sister worked at many years ago was stopped by the troopers while driving along next to the highway, in the ditch. His explanation: "Officer, I'm way too drunk to be on the road." I said it was profiling. Turns out they were arresting everyone driving on the sidewalk that particular night. Ron White. I was a cop on an Air Force base in Alaska. 3 guys robbed our Class 6 store, liquor, and we responded to the store but got caught in traffic at a light on the way. So we were sitting there with lights and sirens on trying to get people to move out of the way when the back door to the car ahead of us opens and a guy gets out and goes spread eagle against his trunk. Confused, we get out to see what was up and realize that these were the robbers. "Hey chief, we got what?" Have a buddy that is a cop. Nothing too crazy, but he's had countless moments where he's tried to give people a break or all they had to do was sit down and be quiet, but they end up talking themselves into jail. Recently had a dude he pulled over that was a bit over the limit but not too much, so he was gonna let a friend pick him up instead of arresting him. Guy got to talking and basically revealed driving under the influence was something he did fairly regularly. A single mistake is one thing, but my buddy decided the best chance at getting him to stop would be learning this lesson the hard way. I had a roommate in college that was no friend of mine. He got in a fight at a bar and was kicked out. He tried to go back into the bar and got thrown out again, but a cop happened to be driving by the second time. Cop told him to relax or he was going to be arrested. He told the cop to arrest him. Cop handcuffs him and puts him in the back of the cop car. Roommate then started banging on the window. Cop then recuffed him with his hands behind his back. Roommate's stupidity carried on for the next couple months. He was supposed to go to court over the whole thing, but didn't show up. Police showed up at his job, cuffed him and brought him to court. Judge told him he would have just received a slap on the wrist. but he now had to send him to jail for a couple days. He was scheduled to report to jail a week or two later, and he didn't show up for that either. By this time, he disappeared. I never saw the guy again. Not a cop but a witness. During college, my friends and I would hang out outside and smoke hookah. Frequently we would invite strangers who passed by to join, or campus police would casually chat with us as they made their rounds. So one time a group of freshmen walked past and asked to join. After about 15 minutes the campus police car rolls up and the freshmen get visibly nervous. We tell them calm down. The cops are chill. As soon as the cop gets out of the car, one freshman bolts and makes it about 20 feet before the cop tackles him. We all clap and heckle the kid. Upon searching him, the cop finds a bunch of weed. Then he says, "You realize prior to running, I had no reason to be suspicious. I just wanted to talk to my friends over there," and points at us. The cop ends up writing a ticket and sends him off. Law enforcers of Reddit, have you ever come across a crime so stupid or ridiculous that you just let it slip? When I was about 17, some friends and I got involved in a scavenger hunt. It was a tie, so the tiebreaker was, bring back the coolest thing you can find. We didn't get anything special, but the other group, they went to a dollar store type place that had a coin operated horse in front of it. It was about 1 AM. No other cars in the lot besides an 86 Nova driven by my friend. They start to dismantle this horse, eventually getting it apart, put it in the back of the Nova with the head sticking out the window, and drive off. They get about 15 feet before the two cops that were watching them the entire time pull up. They ended up having to put this horse back together, then made everyone ride it to make sure it still worked. My good friend was scared and crying, riding a mechanical horse. After I heard this story, I knew the cops probably thought it was the funniest thing they had seen in a long time. Not the US. To clarify for everyone asking, this was in South Africa in the early 90s. When I was in high school, the rugby team found out I had learned how to drive, but not yet received my license. They all knew I did not drink, so one of them had the genius idea of inviting me to parties as the designated driver. We lost a popular kid to a drunken accident a few months earlier, so it was actually a good idea. It was a great arrangement. Lots of parties, lots of girls, and all I had to do was get them home in one piece afterwards. It went great for a few weeks, until one night. The police had heard there was a big party on a farm outside of town and decided to set up a roadblock. So I come driving up to the flashing lights, car filled with 5 big drunk guys, including one passed out with his head out the window, and little scrawny me, barely able to look over the steering wheel, and the inside of the car smells like a brewery. The officer takes one look at the car, asks me to step out. "Have you been drinking?" "No officer, I don't drink." Has me take a breathalyzer. 0. Looks at me. "Can I see your driver's license?" "Sorry officer, I don't have one yet. I'm getting it next week." And I point back towards the car, but they have theirs. He looked at me, flipped his little book closed and said, "Just take them home. Next time I see you, you'd better have your license." In the US, we have a huge DD support movement. You would have probably gotten a medal or something where I'm from. Plus I live in a really rural area where, yeah, underage driving is kinda normal as long as you have a good reason. I overheard this one last night, as I was sitting near 2 Indiana cops at Panda Express. So this lady had a warrant for an unpaid ticket and missed court date. I bring her in, and it turns out that her address is wrong and she never got the court summons. The original ticket was for possession of a black bass under 14 inches, and since she had missed the court summons it was now on her record. So if she goes to apply for a job and they inevitably ask her, "Do you have any criminal history?" she's obligated to say yes. Now imagine if the employer asks why. I caught a small fish. My ex-fiance was a cop for a redneck town where the people didn't have much money. He was called to the grocery store where a little girl about 9 was being detained in the manager's office for stealing a box of tampons. He said she had tears and snot everywhere and her pants had obvious blood stains all over the front. My ex then bought the box she was trying to steal along with 3 more boxes, some food, and milk. He then drove her home to a trailer that was falling apart. It wasn't so much the crime that was ridiculous but more the manager's reaction. I guess when my ex came in the manager was just screaming at this terrified 9-year-old. I've been laughing at some of the other comments, This one made me really sad. I frequently ordered when I was in uniform, let impaired care or control slide. If I found someone sleeping in the backseat of their parked car after drinking, it demonstrated to me a decision to not drink and drive. I'd often take keys or drive someone home, but arresting them just seemed wrong. I was the lucky one once, not charged by a cop. In college my friend had a massive house party. I woke up the next morning face down in a puddle of drool in the bed of my truck. Went inside and found out the cops had busted the party and everyone got underage tickets. Over 30 people, except for me. Not sure if they took pity on me or never saw me, but they had my truck boxed in with squad cars. The lines on my face from the ribs of my bed liner took 2 days to hoe away. They never saw you. When a cop sees a college-age kid totally passed out and not very responsive due to alcohol, you wake up in the hospital. Not a police officer, but I witnessed it happen. I got a phone call from a police officer using my buddy's phone. Apparently my buddy, a jackass, got so drunk he fell out of his car in the drive-thru line at Taco Cabana. The cop told me I had 15 minutes to get there and pick up my friend. I made it in time and the officer helped me throw my friend the bed of my truck. He told me to take my friend home and when he woke up tell him he was a freaking idiot. The police officer was a homicide detective in the major city in which we lived, and he said he had real crimes to solve and to stop wasting his time. I wanna believe you guys literally threw him into the truck bed. A long time ago, in a life far removed from my own, I had a nasty heroin addiction. I cleaned up my life and had been clean for 3 years. My friend had been learning to become a tattoo artist and asked me if I wanted one. To repay his kindness I picked up a 30-pack and some tequila. After about 3 hours of him digging in with the gun and most of the beers and booze gone, we came up with the plan. We were going to go to the city and score some dope. Didn't take long and we accomplished just that. We found a nice quiet, dimly lit parking lot to pull in and get high. We break out the gear and started. He got his ready faster and got it done. I was out of practice and fumbled around for a bit. Just then someone knocked on the window. It's the cops. We roll down the window and they ask if we knew where we were. Before we can say anything the cop said, "This is the freaking police station parking lot. Are you freaking retarded?" They took the dope and sent us on our way and I now have 13 years clean thanks to that cop. That story was great in more ways than one. Thanks for sharing. There was this guy where I used to live who would walk around, smiling strangely and approach people trying to shake their hands. As soon as he got a hold of their hand, he would try to kiss them. A friend of mine naively accepted his handshake and literally bent over backward trying to avoid the kiss. A couple of churches in the area had this thing at the end of their services where everyone would shake hands, so this guy would show up to reap the harvest. The cops were called on him a few times, but to my knowledge they never arrested him but just drove him far away from the area and dropped him off and made him walk all the way back. Reap the harvest. Very compelling image of the dude drooling over the thought of so many hands to kiss. Pulled a guy over last night whose license expired. Not suspended, or revoked or denied, just expired. Dumbfounded me. How do you go 5 years with an expired license? Told him to get it renewed. The thoughtless lapse wasn't worth a trip to see the judge and the fines. Sent him on his way. The thoughtless lapse wasn't worth a trip to see the judge and the fines. Sent him on his way. That's how he got away with it for 5 years. Prosecutor here. I came across one such domestic violence case during intake. The facts: husband and wife arguing. Husband grabs wife's keys and throws them in the yard. Husband is charged by beat cop with criminal tampering, and technically, husband was guilty under the law. I've never written a faster motion to dismiss. My grandpa was a police officer in Houston in the 60s and 70s. He told me of this time where a lady called to report some dynamite she found in her own garage. When he arrived on the scene, he realized that said dynamite was actually a candle. So being real careful, he took a lighter from his pocket and lit it to prove it wasn't dangerous. The lady who called bolted from the house running from a lit candle. I was actually observing the following exchange in court once. A lady received a ticket for a seat cushion violation. So, in my state, FL, if you are unusually short for whatever reason, you get a restriction on your license that says you need a booster seat to drive. Makes logical sense. Here's how the exchange went. So miss, whatever you're here for, a seat cushion violation. Wait, is that even a thing? Lengthy exchange with the state attorney followed. They put white noise in so we couldn't hear it, but the judge was laughing her ass off the whole time. Well, okay, that's a new one. How tall are you? 5'2", Your Honor. So you're not that short really. Do you have a restriction on your license? No, Your Honor. The officer said I looked really short and needed it. Wait, what? Case dismissed. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. My British spelling is apparently blowing people's minds. I've lived in Florida for 14 years but was born in England. I still spell the English way is all. I live in Florida and my wife is 5 feet 1 inches. I'm sharing that with her. As a young patrolman in the Air Force Security Police, got a call to an office referencing possible sabotage or theft of classified material. I remember thinking how this could be a huge case. I was thinking ahead about all the questions to ask and who would have to get called in. I get to the office, get all the basic identifying information from the complainant victim. I asked her what made her think there was sabotage going on and she told me that the last couple days she's been coming at her work and date on her 2.5 inches discs. Yes, I'm old enough for those, has been erased. So, I ask where she stores her disc. She turns to her whiteboard, and crap you not, pulls her disc out from under a magnet. I actually stood there, blank-faced in awe as this woman who developed complex systems for the military held this disc out to me. All I could say was, "Mom, do you know what happens to a magnetic storage device when you expose it to a magnetic field generated by, say, a magnet? Welcome to my life. Welcome to technical support. This is typical customer behavior, and then they expect you to fix it. Headache." I was working the metal detector at our court. I tell people to remove anything metal from their pockets and place it on the table before walking through. This one guy pulls out his plastic bag of weed and lays it out in front of me. I did a triple take to make sure it was what I thought it was. I told him that marijuana is not metallic and that he should keep that in his pocket next time. Since he already has some legal issue pending in court, I decided not to pile anything else on him. I confiscated the bag and signed it into evidence to be destroyed. No charges. I see the guy around all the time now. Bringing weed to court is just so metal it would probably set off the metal detector anyways. My grandfather was pulled over by the Bay Police for breaking the speed limit on a wave runner without a license. The cop said he had never seen anyone so old speeding before and let him go. I like his logic. We need to see weirder groups of people do illegal stuff so at least there would be at least one record of it in history. A couple of friends and I were driving down the highway to a friend's house. We took 2 cars because of the amount of people. A girl in my car has the good idea to moon the other car of people. She rolls down the window and just sticks her whole bum out. We would later find out her vulva was in full view as well. This is going on for about a minute until we suddenly realize there is an officer right behind us. Tailgating. He has clearly seen what is going on, and everyone in the car is flipping out. Until we realize he is laughing. Move the car over a lane and he jets right past us. Pretty hard for a chick to show her ass without showing her vag too, if it's a proper moon, anyway. My good friend is a police officer in a really bad section of North Philly and he and his partner once got called to a house by a man because the prostitute he hired bit him and then wouldn't leave. They ended up driving her home but didn't arrest either of them. That sounds like the start of a zombie movie. I was a cop for about 7 years and toward the last few years of that time, I found myself searching for more and more reasons not to take people to jail. I had drunks park their cars and give them rides. Teenagers smoking weed throw it out and be on their way, and realize that arresting people wasn't always the best solution to their mistake. But not everyone that can go to jail should to go to jail. One night I drove through a dark parking lot and noticed a lone vehicle parked in the back and a small light inside. I assumed it would be teenagers doing their thing, or someone smoking. I approached the car on foot and didn't use my flashlight until I was right up on the car. I turn on my light and see a guy naked, alone in the front seat of his car fapping. I tell him I'm the police and he rolls down the window. I ask what he is doing and he says, "I'm jerking off." I shined my light in the back seat and saw he had a car full of groceries. Asked him about the groceries. He said, "My wife gets pee when I jerk off at home, so I came out here to do it. Do you mind?" Dumbfounded. I really don't know what to say, instead reminding him that I could arrest him for public indecency. He laughs and tells me to go ahead. Taking a step back, I thought about his situation. The dude just wanted to rub one out in peace. So I told him to hurry it up and be on his way. He thanked me and rolled up the window. Turning around, I yell back at him, "Why do you have to be completely naked?" He responds, "If I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna frickin' do it right." I laughed and walked away. I hope that man had a good fap. Had to prosecute a case where two teens, boy and girl, stole a pregnancy test and a box of condoms from a drugstore. Recommended dismissing the case on some community service. Told the judge I was doing so because it was a case of the two youngsters trying to close the barn door after the horse had already left. Also recommended that the community service be done in a latex-free environment because the condoms were lambskin. Judge fought an amazing struggle not to laugh. He lost. Those who work in law enforcement, how often do people try to turn themselves in for something that isn't a crime? And what's the most memorable one? So when I was like 8, I stole a pebble from a fish tank. You know those multicolored tiny gravel chunks? I stole a bright orange one. I reached right in the fish tank, grabbed the tiniest one I could find, like 1/10th the size of a penny, and put it up my nose. I got all the way out of the pet store before I just started bawling. My mom asks me what's wrong. I tell her I have to talk to a clerk. We go back inside. I pull a tiny orange pebble out of my nose and hand it to him. Or try to. He doesn't exactly take it. I confess I stole it and ask to go to jail now. Yep, that's my big crime. I actually work in law enforcement. There is only once that someone turned themselves in. I was at the front desk when a little girl, couldn't have been older than 8, walked in crying hysterically. She was all scrapped up and dirt and some blood on her clothes. All she said for the first few minutes was, "I didn't mean to. I killed him. I don't wanna be behind bars." She hit a squirrel while riding her bike. She was dirty because she went over her bike and skidded on concrete and grass. Adults don't turn themselves in, they get caught. That's really morbidly adorable. I was 11 or 12 visiting a local coffee shop that roasted their own beans with my parents during a bike ride down the greenbelt near our home. For some reason, I just had to have a coffee bean that was drying on the roasting rack, so I took it and stuck it in my pocket without anyone noticing. I was wearing those tiny pocketed jean shorts that were also popular in the early 2000s, and as I went to mount my bike, the coffee bean fell out of my pocket and clattered to the ground. My parents noticed and after a teary confession from me, flagged down a police officer nearby and had him explain to me why theft is wrong and almost put me in handcuffs to teach me a lesson. After my parents were satisfied that I had learned from the experience, and forced me to march right up to the counter and wait in line to return the single bean, the cop leaned in close and whispered, "Don't worry, kid. Everyone makes mistakes. Even though your parents are uptight, at least they care. Not everyone is so lucky." Ruffled my helmet hair and went on his way. To this day, I wish I could thank him for one of the most valuable life lessons ever, even though I didn't fully understand till much later. I was a boarding officer in the Coast Guard. We were doing recreational boat boardings around Catalina Island, mostly educational safety boardings but always looking for smugglers. Stopped a small boat just to do a safety inspection and informed them of the small craft advisory. I jumped on board first and before I could say a word an 8-year-old boy thrusts his hands out at me for handcuffs and cries, "I'm sorry officer. Grandpa told me it was okay if I had one. Please don't hurt him." His grandfather had let him drink one of his O'Dowls. We told the kid it was our little secret. You said you would keep it a secret. I work in dispatch. One night 2 girls, they were in their early 20s, walked in saying they needed to go to jail. They said that they got into a fight earlier and felt like they needed to be punished. I was dumbfounded. I keep asking these girls if they were serious. They were. So I call an officer down, he talks to them, and about 10 minutes they are walking out in handcuffs. I later talked to that same officer and he told me the girls were trying to smuggle weed to their girlfriends that were in jail. Rarely, but if it does happen, it's usually a parent turning their kid in. More often than not, we have to deal with the crazies who want to press charges on someone for something that isn't a crime, or trying to drop a felony charge on a person who tried to run them over with a car or something. Pro tip: You can't just make a felony charge go away. If you make a statement to the cops that someone tried to kill you, they will arrest that person if they find them. I accidentally threw a frisbee through a 150-year-old, 6 feet wide decorative window. I called the cops expecting to pay money or something. They showed up and just said thank you for being honest. They said they were really impressed with me, but the truth is my name and phone number were on the disc. This can't be much lamer than some of the other stories on here. I used to work at a bottle store. Once, a homeless person, a regular, came to me and offered to exchange his brand new bike for a bottle of vodka. Clearly, it wasn't his bike, so I said yes, thinking of taking the bike to the police so that someone could get their bike back. After work, I took it to the police station and explained the situation to the cop, and she told me that she was going to charge me with receiving stolen property. I spoke to her sergeant, who told her she was a loser, and he thanked me for helping. I still find it entertaining that other countries call them bottle stores, like they only sell bottles or something. IDK, it doesn't take much to amuse me. Someone I know, who was 16 at the time, set a bag of crap on fire and rang a doorbell. The guy stomped it out. You know how it goes. I suppose the kid felt bad since it was an old man and turned himself in. The cops have seen this kid at the local hangout spot in front of a convenience store, so they told him to be at the store noon the next Saturday to pick up trash and cigarette butts in the parking lot. When he was done, they thanked him for being honest and said don't be an idiot. You could burn someone's house down all because of a bag of crap. He called the crap. My manic depressive friend once turned himself into the police because he thought that he was ripping off Social Security. Keep in mind that he had been up for 3 days by that time. Anyways, he did get thrown off of Social Security. My manic depressive friend, an ex-combat Marine, discovered a dope dealer's house upon giving RH a ride to her home. He called the cops and asked where to stack the bodies, because he was going to clean them out permanent. Just doing his civic duty, don't you know? He had to spend a few days in the nut house. It wasn't a non-crime, but it was a memorable turn-in for me. I had an offender, I worked probation, who had several outstanding misdemeanor warrants for B&E, assault on female, and larceny. I was trying to convince him to come to the office so I could have the warrants served. He refused and told me he knew he had warrants. He said, just give me to the 18th. Just give me a week. I said no, he needed to come in immediately. He of course refused. He was a pathological liar for all the time I knew him. Heavy drug user, lied about everything and anything. Excuse after excuse after excuse. Lo and behold, on the 18th I get an alert on my computer that he had been booked at the county jail. Just like he said he would. No one ever does that. Cop for 15 years. Never had anyone turn themselves in for something that's not a crime. Much more common to have people jump up and down to the point of rabid frothing mouth anger wanting someone they know arrested for something that isn't a crime. Just to give an example before I am asked, had a lady who wanted me to arrest her neighbors because every time she would go outside they would make fun of her to each other on their porch. She said they were saying things that weren't true about her to each other and she demanded I arrest them for slander. I work in immigration and usually during the holidays we will get illegals that turn themselves in for a free ride back to their country of birth. Suitcases and all. I'm from a small town. There was a homeless guy, by choice, who would steal stuff on cold nights just so he could spend the night in a warm jail cell. In the end the police would just tell him to take the property back and let him sleep in the station. This was back in the 50s and 60s. Barney was a good cop. My great-grandfather was an illegal immigrant. He was an orphan in Britain, so the moment he turned 16 he was discharged from the orphanage and enrolled in the Merchant Navy. He was seasick the entire time and so jumped ship when it came at Sydney. He hid out in Hyde Park until it left. He got a job, raised a family, but his past sins weighed heavily on his mind. When he was in his 70s he finally decided to do the right thing. He packed his bag, kissed his wife goodbye and turned himself to the police. When he explained it all, the police just asked, "Are you going to do it again?" "No." "Then go home." Nobody cared. It had weighed heavily on his mind for his entire life, but nobody wanted to punish him for it. Someone once tried to turn themselves in because they thought they'd have a warrant after a sexual harassment complaint at their work. I don't think he grasped the concept of civil versus criminal law. Well, maybe he thought he'd be arrested for sexual assault. No idea what he did, but it can go from civil to criminal pretty fast. I worked in a public defender's office. Once had a client whose dad turned him in for smoking pot because he found a pipe in his room. The kid insisted that he was clean in the police report, but the dad, a cop, wouldn't hear any of it because he insisted that he knew what marijuana smelled like. We got the case dismissed after the pipe tested negative for all illegal substances. A mom once had her kid come up to me while I was working security for a store, and he told me to take him to jail for stealing. Apparently the boy had stolen a pack of trading cards, or attempted to, and the mom found out and convinced him he was going to jail. When I was about 5 or 6, I was in Bed Bath & Beyond and found a river stone on the floor. There were bags of them nearby, and it had fallen out. We got home and it fell out of my pocket in front of my mom. She told me that we were going back to the store so that she could turn me in and the police were going to take me away and put me in jail. Being very young, it scared the crap out of me. I was crying hysterically for well over an hour. I told a clerk, through my increasingly panicked sobs, that I had taken the stone, and instead of sending me to jail, obviously, he told me that it was okay and let me keep the stone. On the way out my mom made me throw the stone into some bushes. Well, she had to drill in the lesson that stealing was bad sometime. Best time is when you're an impressionable young kid, letting you know you can get in trouble for even the smallest things. But then again, I don't know your mom. She could actually be bat crap crazy. When I was a rookie patrolman, a teenager flagged my car down and confessed to accidentally running over a cat with his moped. He put his hands on the hood of my car and asked how much time he would get for animal cruelty. He was actually really shaken up. I felt really bad for him. I explained that as long as he didn't do it on purpose it wasn't a crime and gave him a ride home with the moped half hanging out of my trunk. I also once had an elderly woman come in with her grandson and ask us to arrest him because he was committing sexual abuse. When we asked her who he was abusing, she answered himself. She caught him jerking off and tried to get him arrested for it. If masturbation was illegal, this site would get like 3 hits. When I was like 6 years old, I saw one of those Reese's Crunchy cookie cups at the supermarket. I know, awesome, right? I ask my dad if he'll get me one, because come on, you can't just not try for the cookie cup. And he says no, not today. I persist, but dad won't yield. Using my brain, I decide to sneak one under my shirt and try to smuggle it all the way out to the car. As we're leaving, though, my dad hears the wrapper rustling under my shirt, yells at me, and orders me to go bring it back to the cashier. That was the scariest crap in the entire world. I didn't just know I was going to jail. I could see it. It was right there. Must have been a pretty awkward time for that pubescent cashier guy, trying to pretend like he gave a crap about whether I stole a Reese's cup to help my dad teach me a lesson. And goddamn did it work. I couldn't steal something if I wanted to these days. A little late to this party, but here goes. I've been a dispatcher for 10 years. People rarely turn themselves in, but they are always trying to get other people arrested for non-crimes. And they can be amazingly indignant and angry about these things. 1. My neighbor's sprinkler is getting water on my grass. 2. My pizza toppings are wrong. 3. Another driver took the spot I was waiting for at the gas pump. 4. My 6-year-old is not doing what he is told. 5. The car in front of me is going 5 miles per hour slower than the speed limit, and this person screaming so hysterically about it you could barely understand them. And of course, the classic. 6. There's a black guy walking down the street in my neighborhood, unable to explain what is suspicious about this person, other than skin color, etc, etc. People are whiny crybabies. I'll tell my story of turning myself in, that is pretty memorable and hilarious. I was visiting my friend's cabin where her and her mother live. At the age of 20, it was deemed acceptable by her mother that we, my friends and I, drink alcohol. My parents also have no problem with me drinking, as long as I am in a safe environment. So my friend and her mom were gone all day working and left us alone in the cabin. The other person who drove up with me, we'll call him Carl, and I proceeded to have beers throughout the day, stopping by the lake and then watching TV. My friend's mom gets home and she is in a huge panic. She says she got a ride home from her co-worker's boyfriend, who was a state trooper, and that they were coming inside for drinks and we needed to clean up now. There were beer bottles pretty much everywhere from the weekend, so cleaning up was a bust. He walks in the door, and we hide our beers under blankets. He was being a real dong, and asking us questions about how old we were, if we had been drinking, if he should believe us, and if our friend's mom condoned it. Then he walked into another room in earshot and talked to my friend's mom. He was telling her how he had to report it, and that she could lose the house and get in huge trouble for assisting the abuse of minors by providing them alcohol and blah blah blah. We clean up and hide our beers and are completely panicked. He eventually says he will hang out and see to it that we aren't drinking. He proceeds to down a few beers over an hour or so, and suddenly his radio goes off. He needs to get somewhere now, and can't drive because he drank. So guess who he asks to drive? That is right, Cole and I. I immediately say I don't feel comfortable enough to drive, and I am going to bed soon. BS excuses. The officer is freaking out insisting that we drive, and Carl decides he is sober enough, only had about 5 beers and hadn't drank the past hour, to drive to the fire. Well, he didn't want to drive, but the officer made it sound like innocent people were dying in a fire and he needed to get there immediately, so Cole made an impulse decision. We get in the car and the officer asks if we know anything about DUI laws. We immediately start pleading and begging and apologizing, saying we didn't want our friend's mom in trouble. We pretty much thought Cole was getting a DUI and that I would get a drinking ticket and my friend's mom would be screwed. Then out come everyone from the cabin laughing their asses off, and the cop starts laughing hard too, and pulls out some beers and hands them to us. We all step out and laugh about it, and go on to enjoy a fun night of drinking with a good guy cop. Police officers of Reddit. What are common knee-jerk reactions when people notice you're there? I once had a cop pull right up beside me on a 2-lane highway. I didn't know if I should make eye contact and maybe give a head nod, or if I should just keep my eyes laser focused straight ahead. I opted for the latter and just kept my eyes on the road. I was only doing the speed limit, so I tried slowing down a few mph to let him go ahead. He slowed down with me. This is when it got weird. It's a pretty dark road and, all of a sudden, the blinding light of 1,000 suns hits me from the side and I quite literally can't see a thing. He turned on his spotlight and put it right into my face. Instinctively, I yell, "What the frick?" As soon as I do, the blues go on and I pull over. The cop runs to my window and screams, "What did you say to me? What did you call me?" I explained that I was just saying what I said because I couldn't see due to his spotlight and I just got really freaked out. He told me that was bulls and kept asking me what I called him. I stayed really calm and just kept repeating that I had no personal issue with him except the light potentially making me crash. He made me sit there for about 15 minutes while he sat in the cruiser. Came back and told me he was cutting me a break and not giving me a citation. Of course, I wanted to remind him I broke no laws but kept my mouth shut. Clearly, the guy had some issues and I just wanted to get the heck away from him. Stop resisting. When I put on my uniform for the first time, I gave myself a fright, catching sight of a cop in the mirror. Putting on a seatbelt. I've never noticed anyone not wearing their belt until they go to put it on. A cop once caught me rocking out a safety dance pretty hardcore when he pulled up next to me at a stoplight. I didn't notice him right away, but when I saw him I jumped and stopped and I'm sure I turned bright red. He thought it was hilarious. You can dance if you want to. I used to provide transportation services to the local coroner. Whenever I arrived in my van, it was amazing what people would do to be there when we removed the body. People decided to do yard work at 10 PM at night or sit on the patio and read the paper in the middle of winter. Another thing I would notice was people turning off the house lights so we couldn't tell they were watching at the window. More often than not, people just stood and stared, but it was always interesting what people tried to do to look like they were not watching. Everyone wants to see a corpse. I didn't do IT officer. He's over here. Lolololol. My biggest sigh moment is when someone runs a red light but sees me at the last second, slams on their brakes and stops in the middle of the intersection. Then, they slowly back up, causing a horrible traffic jam. You've already run the red light, and now you're backing illegally on a roadway. Oh, and everyone thinks you're an idiot and looks at me saying if that was me I'd get a ticket. taking out your phone and pressing record seems to be becoming a lot more common. I hate it when I walk into a room and I'm greeted with, "He did. Him. He's the one you want." I might only be there to use the toilet. I'm not there to introduce a drug dealer's head to the floor. But those jokes were funny, but just once. The other thing is when you chat to people they can become defensive, evasive and abrupt. Sometimes I wish I could forget about professionalism, drop the crap and say, "Look, help me out here." Not a police officer, but my best friend owns a decommissioned cop car. 2000 Crown Vic in standard police white, and it still has its push bumper and CB antennas. Needless to say, the thing looks like a cop car, a lot. So he gets 3 responses. The one when people think he's a cop. The one where people stare in abject confusion at the long-haired, bearded man with a cigarette and wonder if he's some sort of undercover cop. And the one where people figure out he just owns a cop car and get really mad and drive off. The benefits of it are that typically if you get in the fast lane on a highway, everybody just moves out of your way. The drawbacks are that when you get in the left lane and you aren't on the highway, everybody immediately drops to the speed limit. There's no way to really tell them to speed up. If you pull up close and tailgate them they just think you're running their plates and slowly drop to 2 below. The other drawback is the 14 miles per gallon and that the rear doors don't open from the inside. The cuff holders are beastly, though. The cuff holders are beastly. 7-Eleven Slurpees. Sometimes I think people believe I won't see them if they avoid eye contact, like a T-Rex or something. In reality, I pay a little more attention to those people. I knew I probably appear really suspicious when I see a police officer. I don't even do anything illegal but I get so nervous I forget how to act like a normal human. I'm sitting in a living room with 3 cops right now so I asked. People who slam on their brakes when they see a cruiser sitting on the side of the road and then cause accidents. A ridiculous amount of people start crying. A few people have wet themselves after being pulled over. They also said that it's pretty obvious if someone is deciding to run. Sometimes people get ballsy and flip them off. Sometimes on my way to work on a dual carriageway highway with 2 lanes for each direction of traffic, I come across way more traffic than usual, with the fast lane going just under 70 miles per hour and the slow lane going about 60-65 miles per hour. This signifies one thing to me: a police car. Yep, sure enough, wherever there is a police car driving, there will be a clump of traffic around it, all scared of getting caught speeding. The policemen who go out in the cars must think speeding is really rare or something. What's hilarious is when the cop trolls then by driving like 5 to 10 miles under the limit. The entire highway grinds to a crawl. No one wants to be the guy to pass a cop even when he's driving too slow. I'm just like, limit is 60 here, be and cruise by. There is a certain type of person that feels compelled to tell us about irrelevant suspicious behavior while we are eating. You can spot them when they walk in the door of the restaurant and their story usually goes like this. "Hey sir, can I talk to you? The other night I was in my front yard and I saw a car go by. A little later I saw a cat, which is weird cause it was Tuesday, but then I saw a guy walking with a bottle of water and he didn't even look thirsty. What do you think? I'm social so I don't mind talking to people while I'm on break, but this guy drives me crazy." Comment from boyfriend who was a cop for 7 years. The first thing anyone would do when they drove past me was look at their speedometer. If on foot, common reactions were looking away or pretending to talk to someone on the phone. But it often doesn't indicate guilt, just nervousness. I always check my speed when near the police just in case, yet I never speed. I always get nervous walking past the police, yet I never know why. Not a cop but applicable story nonetheless. In my early 20s I worked film set security to subsidize my income. One evening I was guarding the empty extras holding space. In other words, sitting there doing nothing other than reading Maxime. A police officer came in and started talking to me at one point. He even commented on the hot chick on the Maxime cover. He was super casual and I was getting more and more freaked out trying to determine what the heck he wanted. Finally I just asked him. He laughed and said, "Nothing man. I'm just frickin' bored," word for word. Turns out he just wanted to hang for a bit. Military security can be the same. Doing my duty for the night, just sitting at a desk really. Airman comes up, M16, M9, standard loadout, just relaxes and chats for a bit, helps them break the monotony. My uncle is a police officer in UK. He says that on the motorway a lot of the traffic police will travel between 60 miles per hour and 65 miles per hour to allow other cars to go past them because no one wants to drive at freaking 70. When they've overtaken us they can go as fast as they like. He will only pull people over for going over 80 miles per hour. He says the extra 10 miles per hour over the 70 mile per hour limit really makes a difference to congestion. I live in NYC, where you sometimes get randomly searched when entering the subway. Here's my trick for avoiding police scrutiny when I'm carrying weed, sweets, donuts, candy bars, ice cream, whatever. Nobody looks dopier and less threatening than a grown man blissfully stuffing his face with chocolate. As I enter the subway, I take out my Boston cream donut and take a big, gooey bite. I've got chocolate on my face, chocolate on my fingers. The cops just give a disgusted little shake of their heads and let me walk by. Big freaking baby. I can practically hear them thinking. Other than that, like other officers said, no evasive action, no sudden movements, no attempt to avoid the officers. Pretty sure a grown man blissfully stuffing his face with chocolate looks kinda stoned. First of all, I'm a police officer with the Metropolitan Police, London, England. Funny hats, that gig. Yes, I do have a slightly mischievous sense of humor. In the UK I think the practice of using unmarked cars is a lot more common, so that can get very interesting. Quite often if I'm in an unmarked car and I see someone on their mobile phone whilst driving, illegal here, I make gestures for them to put it down, maybe give the horn a little beep to get their attention. It's surprising how often they will stick their finger up at you, at which point I just flick the blue lights on and watch the phone go down so fast, then watch them stopped at the light looking like they wish the ground would swallow them up. People tend to have more of a knee-jerk reaction when they learn what I do for a living. They'll happily be chatting away about the most inane of things when it comes up in conversation and yeah, so, cool, right, usually followed by either a hot fuzz joke or what's the fastest you've ever driven a police car? Not a cop but a friend of mine would run down the street when we were by at a party at my college. When she saw a cop, she was stopped and arrested for underage drinking so many times because of it and could never understand why. Yeah, I've seen people stupidly do that. Just causally walk away. That's what I do, and cops usually don't bother chasing you. It's those stupid kids that get onto a full-on sprint that get pinched with underage drinking. I go to the same gas station pretty regularly, and oftentimes when I'm there at night while wearing street clothes I'll get stopped by someone asking for $1 or some spare change. One night I stopped by there after work, wearing dark pants and a dark shirt with my badge hanging around my neck, and as soon as I step out of my car I hear someone call out to me in the now recognizable "I don't know you but I'm gonna ask you for something" tone. Hey man. A scruffy looking guy walks up to me, eyes a little shifty, and repeats his greeting and starts talking about trying to get home. I see his eyes glance down to my badge and hold for a second and notice brief pause in his speech before he looks me in the eyes and asks, "How's work going?" "Fine, thanks." Alright, right on, anyway, and he goes into a long drawn out story that isn't related to anything at all, but which I assumed was an attempt to build rapport so he felt comfortable asking for a buck. Sounds judgmental, but I always know when someone's about to ask for money. Then all of a sudden he ends with, "Okay man, well you have a good night," and he walks off without asking for a thing. So I guess his knee-jerk reaction was that asking a cop for money would get him in trouble. The funny thing is my badge said party officer because I bought it as a cheap way to dress up for a Halloween party I was working. I am not a cop, but it saved me from telling someone I did not have any cash. Should have arrested him. Obviously he wasn't partying enough. When I was just out and about, people would go out of their way to say hello to me, to a ridiculous extent. Also, when I would get coffee or whatever on the way into work I would sometimes get freebies. I always appreciated the sentiment, but let's be honest, I was threatened with weapons more often when I was a sales clerk than when I was an officer. Overall, people just treated me better, unless, that is, if they were actually entangled in the justice system. I did a lot of courtroom duty, and whenever I would walk through the halls, people would get really quiet and stare at me. It was very surreal at first because in real life, I'm a pretty quiet and unremarkable person. But even though I had a number of violent and troublesome offenders to deal with, I actually think I had it easier than some of my coworkers because I was a woman. I still am. Actually, more often than not, the men would flirt with me and the women would ask me questions about how I ended up in law enforcement. Or they would complain that a certain attractive male officer that I worked with wasn't there. The biggest downside was that I ended up with a couple of guys who were a little too interested in me, but they were already in jail, so I didn't have to worry too much. Most common it seems is when we walk into a store on a call or place to eat. Someone inevitably either does A. Raises his hand in the air and says I didn't do it, ha 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 ha, jabbing whatever friend he's with his elbow. Or B. Grabs the friend wife he's with and says here she is officer, I got him for you. It's only when there's a group of people guy in front of a girl. I usually shrug it off or make a comment about it being the first time I've heard that, in a really sarcastic manner. One time when a guy did the hands up didn't do it maneuver, I made a really serious face, pulled out my cuffs and lunged at him. He started pleading and saying he was just kidding and thoroughly embarrassed himself in front of the friend's girl he was trying to impress with his witty sense of humor. The only thing that seriously irks me is when a parent turns to their child, points at me and tells them if you don't behave they're going to take you away. I scolded a woman for like 5 minutes over trying to scare her kid with the police and basically saying that if the kid ever needs help she's gonna be too scared to go to an officer. Then I gave the kid one of those badge stickers and some candy and tell them to call me anytime they need serious help. I usually keep something like that on me for just such occasions. One time a lady scared their kid so bad they started screaming bloody murder. We usually keep stuffed animals in our trunk for kids involved in traumatic incidents, so I gave her one of those. I'm going to tell my cop friend to start carrying candy because that is awesome. I try to be GGC as often as humanly possible. Unfortunately, here in Australia we have an overburgeoning bogan, see white trash culture with a heavy side of over-entitled opinion and undereducated people who believe that any and all police interaction with the public instantly constitutes brutality. I can count the scuffles I've had in my time doing this job on a couple of hands and all were justified. 99% of the time, my mouth does all the work and both my partner and I leave without a fight or messy end to most situations. People need to learn to respect all people, regardless of race, color, creed or uniform. If this actually occurred, I'd be a much happier man. Just remember, be excellent to each other and don't be buttholes to the boys in blue. Sorry in advance for the token butt wipe coppers out there. I hate to tar all with the same brush as much as I hate being tarred also. Peace people. I hold my drugs out the window and start masturbating furiously. It's a nervous thing. But officer, I can't pull over any further. I am already pulled over. You've been visited by Professor Papa. You'll ace all your classes this year only if you comment study hard Papa. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check out another video. Or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.